All right, so we are recording. So welcome everyone. Today's career guest speaker is Dr. Sandra Taylor, and she's joining us all the way from Purdue University. What time is it there?
It is 6 o'clock.
Wow, 6 o'clock. All right. So she is kind enough to donate her time today, and I will let her kind of share her background with you guys and everything. But thank you so much for being here. And again, students, as she goes through, she has some questions that I've sent her ahead of time. She also has a couple questions that students have submitted. At the end of the interview, I will open up the chat so you guys can type in some questions that she can answer at the end. All right, so welcome. Thank you again so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to ask you a series of some questions. So the first one we have is just go ahead and if you want to give us a little introduction about yourself, maybe explain your current job title that you have and maybe why you chose that career.
Sure. So I'm Sandy Taylor, and I'm really happy to be chatting with you guys today. I'm glad to see some of these pictures up on over your names, goats and horses. Fantastic. So I grew up in the Tri-Cities. I'm from West Richland, and I went to undergraduate school at Washington State University and did graduate school there as well. So I got a PhD there. Loved WSU. I was there for, about 10 years. And so after vet school, which is a 4-year program, then I did some more training to become specialized in internal medicine. So just like with human medicine, there are specialties that you can do as a vet. You don't have to. You can graduate from vet school and start practicing right away. But I wanted to specialize in internal medicine. So really looking at organ function and diseases, sick animals that are like sick babies that might have sepsis where they have infection that's affecting their whole body, or pneumonia. So as opposed to specialties like surgery, or really looking, there are some specialists that look primarily at reproductive diseases. And so after I decided, okay, I think I want to do internal medicine, I went down to California and did a residency there. So it's a 3-year training program where you really focus on just the internal medicine aspect of veterinary medicine. And that's when I chose large animals. So I see primarily horses, but then also other large animals. And when we say large animal, we basically just mean not cats and dogs. They're considered small animal. And so from there, I did my graduate school, my PhD after the residency. So that was when I went back up to WSU and then came to Purdue. So when I was done with graduate school, I knew that I wanted to teach. So I wanted to combine veterinary medicine, seeing patients, focusing on internal medicine, but also getting to teach and even do a little bit of research. And so the job here at Purdue, so we're in Indiana, we're right below Chicago. We have a veterinary school that's very similar to the vet school at Washington State University. So I'm able to see patients. They come into the school. We have a big hospital. And so we can see those patients. And while we're trying to figure out what's wrong with them and treating them, we're also teaching. So we're teaching the 4th year or senior vet students as they're rotating through the rotation that is large animal medicine. And then in addition to that, I teach the vet students, so 1st through 3rd year, that are taking classes. Most of that is classroom and laboratory work. So really learning the basics of animal diseases. And then we also are one of the few schools here that has a veterinary nursing program. So we have a whole nursing school here. And so that's great too. We get to teach those students as well. And they also come on the clinic floor to learn on the job training. And then I get to do a bit of research as well. And so my job is very diverse. Every day is very different. And I love it. I have always been so glad that I chose this profession. And as far as, what really led me here, I wasn't one of those students, not like you guys, who already are thinking, I want to be a vet. I didn't decide until I was in college. So I knew that I wanted to pursue medicine in some way or another, whether that was become an MD or a physical therapist or veterinary medicine. I wasn't quite sure, but my sister and I grew up on a farm in West Richland. And so, you know, we rode horses and we had goats and we had pigs. And so I always knew I really enjoyed the large animals, but it wasn't until really my second year of undergraduate, so second year of college at WSU, where I started thinking more about veterinary medicine. And I decided to volunteer at a hospital in Pasco, and that's the Blue Cross Animal Hospital, and loved it. And it's small animal, but that is when I just knew that's what I wanted to do. So that's kind of how I ended up there. And then each step along the way helped me decide, oh, okay, internal medicine. Oh, okay, large animal. Okay, teaching. And then everything just together then led me to where I am today. And I've been at Purdue for 10 years now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I hear you, you mentioned WSU was kind of where you started your vet school. I do know that you also attended CBC, Columbia Basin College. When you first started out there, would you say that's when you were kind of unsure about being a veterinarian, and maybe when you're at CBC that you were just thinking about medicine at that point? And I say that because I think sometimes we have students that think to be a doctor, to be a veterinarian, I have to go to like a 4-year school right away. And I guess maybe speaking to what a opportunity it was maybe to start at a community college first, and maybe the benefits of that for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, I spent 2 years at CBC and I loved it. It was a great opportunity to take basic science classes. And it was during those classes and my experiences there that really started pushing me towards medicine. So exactly right, that's when that was really triggered, and I really started to think, okay, definitely medicine of some sort, science, but wasn't quite sure what that would look like. And so then after CBC, I was able to transfer to WSU with an associate's degree and then hit the ground running. I didn't have to take any of the extra courses that you might have to take in undergraduate that might not really be directed towards the degree you're going to get. And so that CBC was very helpful for me. And so then 2 years of remaining undergraduate studies at WSU was then right before the 4 years of vet school. Yeah, that's a great question.
Awesome. I think CBC needs to have you in to talk to their students as well.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to.
I will probably have to mention something to them. So that's awesome. You talked about your path to get there. So is there anyone in your life that inspired you specifically to become a veterinarian?
Yeah, you know, really the first person was Dr. Cupp. So Robert Cupp is the vet at Blue Cross Animal Hospital in Pasco. And he was just, and he's still practicing. I think he's decreased his time a bit. He's close to retirement, but he owns his own practice. He's been a solo veterinarian, works by himself for his whole career. And he just was the epitome of compassionate care for animals, client communication, and was just really a great role model. So I found myself wanting to emulate him, and I still am in touch with him regularly. If I have an interesting case, I tell him about it. He'll tell me about something he might see. And honestly, if it weren't for him, I would not be here. It sounds so cliche, but really he was the person that made me decide, oh, this is it. It's not human medicine. It's not pharmacy. It's not these other disciplines, that it's really vet med. So I would say he was the first. And really each step I've taken, I've had a great mentor. And so during veterinary school, I had a mentor that was also an equine, so a horse internist, just focusing on internal medicine. And she taught our internal medicine course as a third-year vet student. And I specifically remember watching her give this presentation to us, just a regular class. And one day just thinking, gosh, I wish I could explain things to other people as clearly as she is. So taking a concept that is very complicated and then making it something that you could understand, even if you didn't have experience or know the intricacies of pathways or, you know, physiology and all the things that as a student you're trying to put together, it just clicked. And I just remember thinking, I want to be her. I want to be her someday. So that was really one person that guided me towards the route of teaching. But every place I have been along the way, I've had at least one really good, solid mentor that I'm still in touch with today that has been very helpful in pushing me and giving me encouragement and really just supporting me. So definitely along the way, lots and lots of people.
I love that. So students, as you're listening, maybe just kind of thinking about along the way, who is it that you could have be a mentor for you, or if you need help, kind of identifying those people. It could be your friends' parents. They could be anywhere. So if you need help with that, make sure that you can contact me or college guidance specialist Mike Brown. We can try to help you in that area. You did talk about some training that you had along the way when you were talking about your path. Could you just share in general what are like the certifications and the education, the degrees that you need, maybe as a different level, the different levels of being a veterinarian?
Yeah, sure. So I took a fairly traditional route in that I had a 4-year degree at WSU. And again, I was only there for 2 years for that because of CBC, and then went into vet school, which is a 4-year program. Now, WSU and most veterinary programs have a pre-veterinary track. So for you students that already think this is what I want to do, you can start that process in college, in your undergraduate studies. And for those students, you might only do 2 or 3 years of undergraduate before you get into vet school. So some students are accepted into a pre-vet program right out of high school. And so that can definitely direct your studies a bit more. And usually you'll get in earlier than most students. So you don't have to have an undergraduate degree to get into vet school, is my point there. But I did. And then after, so when you get done with vet school, you have a DVM, a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. And like I mentioned, you can go out and practice. You don't need to open another book after that. But if you want to go on and specialize or teach at a university and teach vet students, which is what I wanted to do, then you typically will do some sort of internship, which is 1 year after vet school, that is intense training, very busy. I did that down in Southern California at a private practice. So this referral hospital that was just north of San Diego, that was all horses. So these are horses that have already been seen by vets in the field. So vets going out to the farm, they say, your horse is sick. It's beyond what I can do. We need more fancy, either diagnostic toys or whatever it might be, or intensive care where they need 24/7 care. Then they would come to us. So I did that for a year. Then you don't get any kind of certificate for that, but you do have to have that before you then do a residency. So for people, for example, that are interested in small animal, there are a lot more residencies just because there are a lot more small animals out there. When you just look at the numbers, large animal is about 10% of what our entire veterinary school sees, and 90% is dogs and cats. So for that specialty, you can specialize in subspecialties. So neurology, looking at the nervous system, oncology, only looking at animals with cancer, ophthalmology, where you're only looking at eyeballs. So everything that you can specialize in human medicine, you can specialize in veterinary medicine. So a lot of that is lumped together within internal medicine when it comes to large animals. But yeah, there's definitely a ton of opportunities for residency programs and specializing. But again, you don't have to do that. And then that could have been a place to stop where, okay, now you become board certified. So you take a big exam after a residency. Now you have board certification. You are considered they call it a diplomat of whatever college it is. So for me, it's the American College of Veterinary Internal Medicine. And I went just one step further, which was to get a PhD. And so again, that was back at WSU, and that was another 4-year program. And so at the end of that, had that degree, and then those things were all needed for a professor position at Purdue. And you don't have to have all of those things for some positions, but for the position that I applied for, it was required to have all of those, because the PhD is really there to help you have your own research lab, so you can write grants to get money to do research. And then of course the specialty is so that you can then train your own residents. So now I have 3 residents who are training to become large animal internists. And then of course all the students as well. So yeah, lots of school, but it's not always necessary for, of course, not for being a vet, but there are so many avenues you can take in veterinary medicine. That's one of the things that I love about it.
That is amazing. That is, yeah, it kind of blows my mind, all of the specialties that are available. And there's probably even more now than when we were kids. So
yeah, oh, sorry, that's my dog barking. Lola. But yeah, in fact, we do dialysis in small animals. And, you know, the only thing that we're not quite to the point of organ transplants, but I think that's going to be coming very soon. But, you know, heart surgeries, valve replacements of hearts, all of that stuff is done in vet med now.
Hope you guys, if you got the newsletter, the CHS newsletter I sent out on Fridays when we had our little blurb about Sandy coming to speak, I did put a video in there of her and her team at Purdue saving a horse named Lucky. And that's an absolute amazing story and kind of an example of what she talks about, just the depth of the medicine that they're able to do and the diagnosis. So if you have not seen that video, check it out. It's really amazing and heartwarming how you guys were able to save that horse. I'm sure it's one of thousands of animal stories of the amazing work that you guys do. You talked a bit about the classes that you first kind of take for being a veterinarian. So the science classes, are there any other kind of specific classes that students should think about or start taking now that could transfer over?
Sure. So the basic science classes would be biology, chemistry, biochemistry, if there's molecular biology. So when I was in high school, we didn't have molecular biology classes where you're learning about polymerase chain reaction and looking, you know, at actual DNA. That it's really just come so far that I know that's now something at least offered in, I think there are some college classes, you guys, or high school, you guys are probably all laughing, but yes, I think that you probably get that now. We didn't see that until, gosh, late in college. So with those are the classes I would think about. Also zoology, that's a good class to take. But that brings up a good point that you don't necessarily have to focus only on science. So when we are interviewing students for a position in the veterinary school class, we look at all kinds of different things. So, you know, of course, grades are important, but they're not the only thing. And that we have plenty of students who come from backgrounds that are very diverse. So I had a classmate who was, Lola, sorry, my dog, of course, is barking now. But I had a classmate who was an aeronautical engineer before vet school. So a lot of people choose veterinary medicine as a second career. And so different backgrounds are actually something that we're looking for. Now, of course, science classes you will need for the classes that you'll take in vet school. So having a background in that is important, but don't be discouraged if you focus, even if in college you focus on classes that are not super science heavy, you can always then take either prerequisites, but you don't need a ton of them to get into vet school. So, but yes, definitely biology, chemistry, biochemistry. Those are the 3 that I would say would be most helpful. But I don't know if it necessarily has to be in high school. Those are things that I took the basics in high school, but they were the required courses, and then really focus more on it in college.
Awesome. Great advice. And I don't know if you know this, Sandy, but here in the Tri-Cities, we have TriTech Skills Center in
Oh,
Kennewick, and they actually have a pre-veterinarian technician program that you can take as a junior or senior in high school. So students, if you're interested in that, you can see your counselor and talk about the option of doing that. But they can do incredible, they're starting to do incredible veterinarian work in high school.
cool.
And those classes can even transfer over as credit into college. So it's amazing. I think we might have had it back when we were in high school, but I never even had heard about it. So it's amazing what they're doing.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And just to clarify, when we say technician, we also, it's the same thing as a nurse. So veterinary, we've used the term veterinary technician forever, but it just makes more sense for people that aren't sure what they do to say it's a nurse, because they do the same things that nurses do for human medicine. So just to clarify that in case you guys are wondering, a lot of people will have clients, you know, owners of animals that will come in and they'll see, you know, the word technician on a shirt or hear us say that, and they picture a mechanic or, you know, a technician, a respiratory technician. So it's a little more clear if we say nurse to clients, but yeah, just so that you guys, in case you're wondering, they're the same thing.
Thank you. I just learned something new right there. Very cool. So can you tell us, if you can rewind back to your very first job out of vet school, what was that experience like, and what did you learn maybe in that first job that helped you be successful?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it was my internship down near San Diego. And I, to this day, would say it's the hardest year of my life and one of the most fun. And I think it was because I just loved what I was doing. Lola loves it too. Lola, come here, come here. Sorry, my 15-year-old Labrador thinks that it's time to chat.
Oh,
So I know
she's welcome to pop in and say hi.
love you. But that was really when I really got a taste of knowing what I could do as far as hard work. So I worked really long hours and was able to learn in the process, still have a good time with the people that I worked with, but it was also humbling because I made mistakes. And I remember this foal. So a foal is a baby horse. You guys probably know that, but this brand new baby horse came in, and I'd been up for a while because of the internship. It's just very busy hours. So I was tired and was not thinking very clearly and made an error in my medication. So I swapped two syringes. So one syringe had one drug, the other had another, and I accidentally gave this foal the wrong drug. Now, thank goodness it didn't hurt the foal, but it was very scary. And it taught me a couple of things. One, you need to double check when you are, you know, either doing math that's a dosage or something that really could have profound effects on an animal, and to just stay humble and never just assume that you know what you're doing all the time and that you're not going to make a mistake. Mistakes happen. But then also how important sleep and self-care is. And I think that now, as we've learned a lot more, especially in the medical field, both human and veterinary medicine, how important it is to have some balance and not just be working nonstop and just trying to get through that. We really understand now that we do need to have breaks, and internships aren't set up the way that they were then, just because that's recognized. So I try here, even though I work long hours, I do try to take time to unplug and not look at screens, not have my phone with me, go for walks, read, do the things that, you know, mess with my two labs, play with them, go for walks, but just have time where you're being mindful about other things besides work. It's easy, especially when you really like your job, to become a workaholic. And I was for several years, arguably, maybe still am, but it's better. just trying to focus on other things besides your job. But that also just as a something else that I would just give advice on for anyone is that I definitely recommend doing something you love. You know, I have had a lot of friends who took a job because either it paid well, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you also don't really enjoy it, it's going to be a chore. It's not going to be something you look forward to. So just as kind of a sidebar, some advice, I still work very long hours, but I still love it. And, but again, back to self-care, it's really important to take some time out for yourself. So that was definitely the toughest year, but I developed relationships with the other interns there. There were 2 others. We're still friends to this day. And even my vet school friends are some of my best friends. You will form bonds in any career, any kind of training you go into where it's intense. You'll make friends and you'll be lifelong friends. So that's definitely a benefit.
Awesome. Awesome advice. Let's see, there was something that popped in my head that I didn't pre-send you that I wanted to ask. Oh, you talked about working long hours. Could you share with the students what like a typical day looks like, maybe how many hours you're working, and maybe how many days a week, something like that, a little snapshot of what that looks like?
Sure. So at Purdue, 50% of my time is what I would say is on clinics. So that's when I'm seeing patients that are being referred in from vets in the field or from other hospitals. And that's when I'm teaching residents and the 4th-year veterinary students. So those days are the longest. Those are generally 12 to 14-hour days. And I'm also on call. So I typically will get called, maybe 3 times a week overnight and about emergencies, because we also are taking in emergencies 24/7. So that time is very busy. It's one of the most fun parts of my job, but it is very busy. So yeah, I'd say 12 to 14 hours. The winter is a little bit slower for us because foals and calves generally are having their babies in the spring, and then summer is a time when a lot of people are active with their horses and doing shows, and so horses are traveling and they might get sick more often. And so I would say December and January are probably our slower months, but it's still quite busy. And at Purdue, like I said, we see in large animal everything. We see horses, I think I mentioned this, maybe not, horses, cattle, goats, we see sheep, we see pigs, the occasional camel, the occasional zebra, we get some random things. And so that also makes it quite busy. There are several schools that split their equine from the farm animals. So in those cases, if we did that, it would be a bit slower, more reasonable hours, probably more like 8 or 10 hours a day. But we are exceptionally busy as far as our large animal caseload compared to a lot of schools. So it's great, but it is quite busy. And we are in the process of actually building a brand new hospital, and we'll have to definitely hire more people, and then things should even out a bit more. But when I'm not on clinics and I'm writing papers, writing grants, doing research, teaching, that is more of a regular 8-hour day. And that is a bit easier as far as making my schedule my own. So there's a lot of flexibility. I can plan to do a research project that might be long hours for a week and then have shorter hours the next week. Or if you have a research experiment that's going on where you need to get up and go in at 5 in the morning and then go back at 5 p.m. to take a sample or whatever it might be, then maybe those few hours in the middle of the day, I won't work. I'll come home or I'll go to the gym or do something else. So there is definitely a lot of flexibility, which is nice.
Got it. Yeah, listening to all those hours you're putting in, I feel even extra lucky that you're making time for us today.
Oh gosh, I'm happy to. And I'm not on clinics right now. And I scheduled it now so I wouldn't be interrupted. Otherwise my residents might be calling. And so, yeah, now it's just my dogs that are, interrupting.
They're wanting a little bit of your time too. I understand that. Was there any, we talked kind of about people who've inspired you. Is there any other pivotal moment in your career that really kind of got you going one direction or helped contribute to your success?
Yeah, it's funny because when I was in vet school and probably my third year, so I only had 1 year left. We that's about when you start thinking about what you're going to do and what job you might apply for. And I thought I would go be a vet in the field for just horses in Seattle. So there was a practice there. It's called Northwest Equine. And I had done an externship with them. So where I spent a few weeks with the vets, really liked them, liked the area, close enough to the Tri-Cities to visit family. And it was the strangest thing. I was literally walking to a fax machine, which maybe your students don't even know what that is. But
we still have one in the office out here. It actually gets used all the time.
Okay, good. So this place that we've been talking about me going there, and we were looking at, a contract, and I was thinking of signing it, and they were going to send me one that was updated. And I was walking to go pick it up, and my phone rang, and the San Diego place was calling to offer me a job. And I just had to decide within 24 hours, am I going to go to Seattle, be in a place where I'm more comfortable, just location wise, I know the area, or am I going to be brave and go somewhere I've never been before and just be at a really busy practice and get a lot of experience? And I decided to do that. And if I had not done that, I really don't think I would have pursued any of the other things that I did, everything downstream. I don't think I would have done. Not to say that I wouldn't have been happy being a field vet, but I'm just very grateful for that opportunity because of how much I've learned and all of the experiences I've had and, will keep having. Is just, I can't imagine not having those. So, it really taught me that plans sometimes just go out the window, and it's really important to be flexible because, what do they say? You have your plans and then life happens and things just change. And that's just the way life is. And this was the first time where it really showed up for me, and I could see, oh, wow, okay, well, I'm going to go do this. And it's also a good example and just a good lesson that you can change your mind whenever you want. You can always change your mind and go do something different, even within vet med. I know people that are veterinarians and love it, but then decided to do something else after, 10 years of practice or whatever it might be. So I just think that's in general, a good life lesson. Gosh. And then I would say during graduate school, doing experiments on, because I was in the lab, pipetting and doing benchtop type research. And that was very pivotal in that's when I really knew I wanted to have a tenure track job where you would go through all these steps to try to get tenure at a place where then you have what they call academic freedom, which just means that you can do the research you want to do and really have ownership of your labs and all the types of research you want to do and publications and all of those things. So I would say those two were the most pivotal. But yeah, who knows what's coming next? I'm sure there will be more.
Yeah, when you talk about flexibility and all those kinds of things, like now more than ever in the times we're living in with COVID, that's just so important. So yeah, absolutely. Now, do you have to travel much for work? Do you have to travel nationally or internationally?
Yeah, I do. I get to travel both nationally and internationally. And the reasons for that are to present research. So I'll go to conferences and I get to present my research findings. And I also get to teach other vets. So because I have specialized and because I'm at a university where we're always researching and looking at what's the latest and greatest treatment, what's the best test for this and the new treatment for that, whatever it might be. Lola, shh, shh, very excited. Come here. Because of those things, then I get to go teach vets who are in the field and don't have the opportunities to see what's maybe up and coming in the latest, state of the art, whatever it might be. So I've gotten to go to Paris, and I've gone to Newmarket, England to teach. Both of those were for teaching and to present research. I presented research in Paris, and then I got to go to India. That was the last international trip that I took, and that was also to present research. That was amazing too. And then for national meetings, I go to probably 2 or 3 a year. One is always in Orlando in the winter, which is great. Going from Indiana to somewhere warm in the winter is always welcome. And then the other meetings they typically change places. There have been a couple in Seattle, but that's great because I always end up going to places that I would never have gone. So yeah, I'm really lucky to be able to do so much traveling.
That is awesome. I had no idea.
Yeah, fun.
Now, does your job require you, or are you bilingual, or does a job require being multilingual, or would that be beneficial?
Yeah, so the job does not require it, but I definitely wish that I was. So no, I am not bilingual. I actually just about 6 months ago got an app to start trying to learn Spanish, because that would be very helpful. We have several clients who speak Spanish, and luckily we have enough people in our area that can help and can translate. But I really wish I would have taken Spanish in high school. I took French. I took 4 years of French in high school, but let me tell you, that did not help me in Paris. That did not help me at all. And my phone was stolen right out of my pocket in Paris because I was a complete tourist and was not very careful. And so then trying to communicate was a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, I definitely wish that I was. And in fact, there are several programs, but one in particular that's in South America that is focused on helping working horses. So when we say working horses, we mean horses that are really essential for the livelihood of their owners. So horses that haul crops that are harvested, that are lugging tourists around. So very important for the tourism industry, especially in places like Peru. And I've been invited to go, but they really need you to speak Spanish, because otherwise you just aren't going to be able to communicate with the local farmers and the rural communities. So that's part of the reason that I started using this app, is to at least get some basics down so that I can actually go and be helpful and not be a hindrance. But I have several friends that, oh, that's my resident calling. I'm not on clinics. I'm not on call.
That's real life right there, getting called.
That's real life. But yeah, so I definitely would recommend it. And, I think when I was in high school, I thought, oh, French, that just sounds so fancy and fun. But I mean, it really, for what I was, not that I knew what I was going to do, but it really was not practical. I was not going to be going to live in France. So I wish I would have taken Spanish, taken something that was actually going to be more useful, but it was still fun.
Gotcha. Yeah, CBC has a big medical interpretation Spanish interpreter program.
Oh, neat.
And so, yeah, I was wondering in your field if you need the medical interpreters as well. So I'm guessing so.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's see, we got a couple more questions here, and then we can move on to some student questions. Tell us about how important communication skills are at your job, and then after that, maybe mention any other skills that might be important.
Sure. So communication is essential. And I think that sometimes people think, oh, well, if you don't like people, you can just be a vet, because then you just, animals don't talk back. But that is definitely not the case. You certainly have to communicate well with the owners that are attached to those animals, and that's very important. And then, of course, just team communication. So with colleagues, with staff, with students, with residents, it's very important to know how to communicate well. And I think that in veterinary medicine, it is a unique profession in that we also need to communicate um, specifics when it comes to euthanasia. So when we have an animal that we think is suffering, we have the privilege of being able to put them to sleep. But those conversations, of course, are very hard. And we are very grateful that we can end suffering, but that's always a very sad time. It's hard for us. It's harder, obviously, for the people who love that animal. But how you go about being compassionate, showing compassion and sensitivity, but also delivering the facts that that owner needs to understand in order to understand why it's time to put an animal down. So, of course, grief can manifest as many different emotions, and so we have to deal with anger, we have to deal with people that just aren't ready, and that's their decision, and it's just a unique opportunity. So yeah, communication is just critical, and especially with teaching, that's something that's a bit unique. Just being a veterinarian that's also a teacher, is that, like I mentioned before, that professor that really inspired me to teach, I wanted to learn, how does she do that? How does she make something complicated work? And whether that's in a PowerPoint format or in being creative with PowerPoints and putting them together, and just with lectures and just day-to-day communication with the fourth year vet students who you're really trying to teach in the moment. So an on-the-job training, here's a patient right in front of you. How do you get across what you're trying to get across? But also, without telling them the answer, you want them to come up with the answer. So asking just the right question or giving them just enough so that it triggers something and a light bulb goes off and then they get it. That's one of the best things about my job. But yeah, communication is definitely critical.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It seems like jobs more and more today that's weighed so heavily on whether you get hired or not are your communication skills or your other soft skills. You think, oh, I have all these technical information, I can do the job, but it's really those communication skills that seem to be getting people hired these days. So thank you for speaking to that. Tell us what the best part of your day is, and then maybe what the toughest part of your day is. And I know maybe what you just spoke about with the euthanasia might be part of that, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say, I'll start with that. The toughest part is definitely when we need to have that conversation of euthanasia and being there for the owners. It's still, like I said, it's still hard for us. It's a sad time, but we also have to be able to get the job done. So function and make sure we're doing everything correctly. And that can be tough when you're also feeling the emotion of being upset about it. And that's just something that just comes with experience and isn't something that really can be taught. But definitely seeing how professors handle that when you're in school, and then as you become a veterinarian yourself, then you start to become, at least you're never comfortable with it, but it definitely is something that, because you know that you are doing something that is in the best interest of the animal and their owner, then it's definitely worth it. And like I said, we feel very privileged to be able to have that option. But that is definitely still the toughest. The best part is sort of what I mentioned just a second ago about figuring out what's wrong with the patient and going through all the tests and all the results of those tests, and then trying to really solve the puzzle. Because by the time that they come to us, usually they're pretty sick, it's pretty complicated, but that's what I love about it, is solving a puzzle where you have to think about the physiology and what's gone wrong and what drug given in the field might be affecting what I'm seeing on this blood work or whatever it might be. and then getting to that answer while teaching. So while a student's there, while a resident's there, and you're working through it, and you've got a whiteboard and you're drawing diagrams, and this led to this, and this led to this, and this is why we're seeing these clinical symptoms, and coming to an answer. That's still definitely the most satisfying part of things. And I don't think it would be quite as gratifying if there wasn't teaching that was happening at the same time, because I really enjoy that, getting to that light bulb moment, because I remember how that felt when I was a student, and I love to be able to help other students get to that point as well. And I just love the variety. Every day is so different. I'm never bored, ever. Sometimes I wish it was a little more boring, but that is definitely a great part. So really it just means every day I'm looking forward to, well, what's going to happen today? What cases are going to come in today? And what am I going to be stumped today? Am I going to need to, call somebody to get some help? Is this going to be a great teaching moment? Whatever it might be. And of course, with large animals, you can't fall asleep on the job. They can be dangerous, and especially when they're in pain. So we always have to be very vigilant and, very, very, very careful. But generally, we have a pretty good system in place to do that, to help us be safe. But it certainly adds to the excitement, I guess. We're always, of course, hopeful that no one's going to get hurt, and we do everything we can. But yeah, never boring. And I do love that we're not bored.
Awesome. Well, I am going to go ahead and get started with some student submitted questions. And students who are here, if you have any other questions for Dr. Taylor, go ahead and drop those in the chat, and then we'll get those answered here. So one of the first student questions I have is, what other jobs can I get working with animals besides just being a veterinarian?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like we mentioned, the veterinary nurse or technician, that's generally, at least here, that's a 2-year program. And I know in some places it can be part of undergraduate studies, and in some it's after a bachelor's degree, but it really just depends on where you are. I do think most are part of a bachelor's program. And like you said, it could be as part of a technical school. We have a couple of technical colleges here that have a program in addition to the one at Purdue. So that's definitely an option. We have people that we've hired that are just called animal handlers. I wish we had a better name, but they're the people that are very comfortable with large animals. So this isn't something that's needed so much in small animal, but we need people that are comfortable leading a horse, trotting a horse, so that we can do a lameness exam, for example, see if they're lame on one leg. People that are comfortable handling beef cattle that are wild and are not appreciating us trying to touch them. So that's definitely an option. There are several jobs like that. Certainly you guys know about, zoo jobs. So zookeepers, people that are working more with sanctuaries. So we have a lot of rescue organizations that will take in animals that have either been abused or neglected, or they just don't have a home anymore, and will raise funds through nonprofit organizations. And their entire jobs are to just care for these animals. Some of them need medications, and some of these places are huge. We have a couple of sanctuaries here that are only focused on pigs, potbelly pigs that are pets, production pigs that we've had some that they've fallen off a transport truck and then they were found on the side of the road, and now they live in a sanctuary and will live to be several years old. So sanctuary type work is also one way to work with animals. Gosh, those are the ones just off the top of my head. We do have research scientists that do research on animals, and those can be anything from mice to, we do research on horses. And I think sometimes people get the impression that research on an animal means that we're, using experimental medications or things that are harmful. And that's definitely not the case in most situations. So that can be a very rewarding job to have to have your hand in actual research, and that can be in many different settings. And then I guess finally, you could be a trainer. There are horse trainers, dog trainers, all kinds of different training can go on, and definitely you can work with animals in that way.
Wow. You're definitely the animal whisperer in my book, that's for sure. We had a question that was given to us, submitted ahead of time. What advice do you have for high school students interested in being a vet? And I think you pretty well covered that. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on? Advice for a high school student?
I would say I mentioned that you should have good grades because it's competitive, but that's not the only thing to focus on. And if you don't have straight A's, it doesn't mean that you can't be a vet. So when students apply to vet school, the admission packet contains all kinds of things. And one thing that is really important is experience. So volunteering at either veterinary clinics, at shelters, at, like the Humane Society, at zoos, whatever it is, just having experience. And like we were talking about earlier, identifying a mentor that could then perhaps write you a letter of recommendation. So those are really important. Now, some vet schools still require the GRE scores, and you would have to have a minimum score to get in, but a lot of vet schools don't require GREs at all. So we don't anymore. We used to until about 5 years ago. And now the GRE is not part of the application. So if that's something that you guys have heard of, it's the graduate record exam. And we just don't require that anymore. So experience, I would say, is number one. I would actually put that above grades, honestly. But then doing well in your classes is important. And I know a lot of schools are moving away from grades, but then I think are still using class rank. So there does need to be some objective way looking at the numbers to evaluate how well you'll do in school. And the reason for that is because vet school is hard. It's a rigorous program. There's a lot of material. And so if you're struggling in school, I think for students that really want to do this, or whatever profession that you really want to do, you'll find a way to, get the grades that you need to get. And there are certainly a lot of programs that can help students with study habits and workload and how to balance it all. And, that's definitely a part of the conversation when you're admitted.
Awesome. Thank you for adding that. Just have a couple more questions here and a few more minutes left with Dr. Taylor. An email question I got is, what other schools should I consider for vet school? So I guess you talked about WSU is always an option for students. Are there any other vet schools close by for us here from the Tri-Cities?
Yeah. So WSU is definitely the closest. There are, I believe, 27 or 28 vet schools in the country now. The closest would be Oregon State has a vet school in Corvallis, Oregon. And then you've got Utah State now has a fairly new vet school, although they don't have a hospital. So the fourth year students have to travel to WSU for the hospital and clinic training with animals. There are a few vet schools in California. And yeah, they're really all over. Now, because there are a lot of rural areas, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, that are near us, a lot of those students can get in-state tuition at WSU. So there is a program, even Alaska will send students down. But yeah, there are lots of vet schools all over the place.
Awesome. Let's see here. We have one more question, which is in our chat. So I don't know, can you see the question there? It says, through vet school, what methods did you use to memorize all of the diseases and treatments? Awesome question.
That is a great question. So for me, I learn by handwriting, and that is quite time consuming, but I find that if I am handwriting it, I will retain it better. So what I like to do is take actual handwritten notes And then I also love flashcards. So that always really helped me when there was memorization. Now, one nice thing about medicine in general is that so much of what you learn in anatomy and physiology, you start to use those things to, you need those basics when you're then talking about a disease that affects anatomy or physiology. So it's not always just memorizing. Your goal is to try to integrate everything, tie it all together, and then apply it as you get closer to learning about a specific disease and you have a specific patient in front of you. So yes, you can't get away from memorization, but you know, the actual integration and tying things together. And we do problem-based learning in that way, where in vet school, first through third year, you're doing a lot of fake simulations of cases, like in a group. Okay, this animal comes in, it's this old and it is coughing. And then you go through the process of working up that case and figuring it out and treating it. And you'll do that several times before you actually have a case. So lots of different ways to learn, and lots of methods. But for memorizing, I like to use flashcards.
Awesome. Great. Another question we have popped up here. What if someone who has autism wants to be a veterinarian? Can you speak to kind of accommodations for
Yeah, definitely.
your profession?
Yeah. There are lots of people on the spectrum that are vets, and there are lots of different ways to, I think it comes down a lot of the time to learning styles. And we do have a resource center for students with challenges. I struggled with anxiety when I was in vet school. I was always on edge and nervous, and I got to talk to somebody who really helped me with that, and that's really helped me throughout my career. So every school, and I would say this goes beyond vet school, will have resources for any struggles that you might have. We have a student that just graduated that is completely deaf. We are working on some ways to even accommodate students with vision impairment. And because veterinary medicine is so diverse and there are so many avenues you can take, you don't have to be doing surgery on a dog. You can do all kinds of different things. So it's a very welcoming profession in that way, that so any kind of challenges can be overcome. Absolutely.
Awesome. I love that. So yes, no matter what, pursue what you love to do. All right, we got 1 minute, so this will be the last question. I want to respect your time here. So we have one more in the chat. If you can see a clear case of animal abuse happening while working, like if someone came in with a dog that is clearly being abused by them, but they came in for a checkup, can you do anything, or do you have to contact someone to look into it? That's an awesome question.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a question we would ask our students applying to vet school. I'm so impressed. Yes, so we have a duty to report animal abuse to the Humane Society. And so the trick really, and what we have to be careful about, is communicating with the owner about that. So a lot of times, in fact, I'll give you an example. We had somebody that brought a pig in last week who had clearly not been being fed, was very, very thin. And of course, it'd be easy to jump to a conclusion like, oh, this animal was just abused, neglected, is starving. But then when we really dug into it, it turned out that the owner had developed dementia and just didn't remember to feed his pig. So we have to have compassion for the owners too. And a lot of times there is a backstory that can really help explain some of these things. But we certainly have been involved in court cases where we are requesting that an animal be taken away from an owner because of abuse. And that's rare. I've only had to do that a couple times in my career so far, but it does happen. But there are places for these animals to go. So if it's a dire situation, then certainly we can call the animal control essentially. But even for large animals, there are places that they can go until it's sorted out and we know what we're going to do. That's a great question.
Awesome. Well, we are about out of time right now. But I want to just thank you so much. I mean, I feel like we could just keep talking easily for another hour. I mean,
Yes, it's so fun.
the depth of your experience and just how much this can help students really sink in and give them a real taste of what to expect is awesome. And students, if you have any follow-up questions, maybe something that you didn't think of today and maybe you want me to send that on to Dr. Taylor, I'm sure I could shoot her an email and she could maybe get back to me with a quick question. But yeah, that's all we have for today. And so I want to thank you students for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Taylor, for joining us all the way from Purdue. This was just an awesome, awesome session and great engagement with the students.